Hello, my name is Matthew, and like I was saying, I was watching Summer's video. Her channel is Cozy Reading with Quaker Cats, and she made a video talking about her 20 favorite books or novels, and I've given it some thought for a day or two, and I I have a pile of books around me of some of my favorite novels, and one of the interesting things about making a list like this is, like Summer mentions in her video, it changes. So my favorite novels today are different than what they would have been a year ago, or 5 years ago, or 10 years ago. And it's not a definitive. Uh, it's, it's just my favorites at the moment. Just today, this morning, it's 3:30 in the morning right now, and I picked three novels that are contemporaries, written by contemporary authors working today. I thought I should have that as a consideration, so I'll just start. These are some of my favorite novels. And I'll start with Umbrella by Will Self. He's a working novelist, author, short story writer. And this is the first book of a trilogy, Umbrella, and then Shark and Phone. I think as a whole, it's his clearly his strongest work, and these are kind of throwback modernist. This is a throwback modernist novel. It's stream of consciousness and experimental, and it just won me over. And I think it shows off Will Self's style really well. And The Lesser Bohemians by Amir McBride, another working author. And I think this is her second novel. Her first book was A Girl is a Half-Formed Thing. And her most recent novel, Strange Hotel. And all three are fantastic. I think The Lesser Bohemians is my favorite of the three. And it's a fairly typical story. It's a young girl in her 20s or early 20s in London, going out at night and having, there's a love story, and it gets dark, but it's fresh and exciting. It's beautifully written. The language is provocative and new. It's one of the things that I think about, especially more so with current writers than writers of the past, is how daring are they? What chances are they taking? So many, all the stories that we read are the same stories. It comes down to how you tell it, and she tells stories in a really new, fresh, fun way. One of the most impressive books is Lucy Ellman, Ducks, Newburyport. One of the most impressive current novels that I can think of. It's a beast. It's this monstrous thing, and it's another stream of consciousness novel. It's sort of a theme with these three books in particular, being experimental and taking chances. And it's a story of a housewife in Ohio baking pies and thinking about things. It has this refrain that runs through the whole entire book. What is it again? The fact that, I think. Now I can't remember. But this book has really stuck with me, and I don't know if it has flaws or could have been better or anything like that, but just what a great decision to make it the way it is. I just love that. And then I have seven, I believe it's seven novels that really aren't quite my favorites. They have some major flaw or something about them that doesn't really quite hit the mark. And this is probably, uh, this category is probably the largest um, category. I could come up with 100 novels that I love, but not quite my favorite. Uh, I don't even know if I really have uh, absolute favorite novel. Um, I think I have a clear favorite book of poetry, but that's a different. Um, The Grass Harp by Truman Capote, and I really have a soft spot for Truman Capote. I think this is his best long work. It's my favorite, and it just has that dotty feel to it. Uh, it's the best of um, what I like about his short stories. It's a little boy and two funny old women who spend time in a tree, and it's beautiful and sweet. I love it. So, and then two books that are very similar, and it's The Red and the Black by Stendl. Just one of the most energetic, um, sparkling writers. I think his books race, and it's not just the plot. It's um, the thought process that runs through the story. The way that the author or the narrator is telling the story is just energized. And then Bellamy by Guida Maupassant. He's one of my absolute favorite writers, and he has a really good handful of great novels, slim things. Most of them are maybe less than 200 pages. And for as much as I love all of them, there's not one. But Bellamy's probably the one, but none of them are like an absolute favorite. And both of these books are society novels, young, ambitious men who start off um, sort of like the bottom rung of society, and you watch them through kind of cutthroat ambition and decadence and debauchery and treachery, work their way up through society. And I don't really think that the main characters aren't supposed to be admired. They're sort of these cautionary tales, or just holding up a mirror to the decadence of the time, maybe something like that. But they're both beautifully written and athletic. They just race along. The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann, and I just read this again last year, and I love it. It's I already know that I will absolutely be reading it again, and uh, have a lot more to learn from it and understand. It is a difficult book, but I think Thomas Mann knows that and tries his best to tackle really big ideas and carry the reader along through the story. It's Hans Castorp, or the main character is Hans Castorp, and he's spending time in a sanitarium for 7 years and kind of puttering around. It's a microcosm book. All the other patients either reflect the views of other countries or philosophical ideas. And this is right before World War I, so it has this ominous feel to it. Okay. Mademoiselle de Mapin by Theophile Gottier. I'm not sure if I say any of that correctly. One of the most beautiful, um, just the sentence by sentence, or these long, strange, luxurious, rich sentences, and this is experimental in a totally different way than Ulysses or the contemporary novels that I just mentioned. And the way that this book will go from seeming like a proper novel to just an essay format to art criticism, or there's a play within the novel. Very, very, very modern, and experimental, and beautiful. I just love it. And I just read The Castle by Kafka, and it's unfinished. So it's one of my favorite books. I just can't put it in a top 10 because it's an incomplete work for whatever rules I'm making up for myself. And so even though having that unsatisfied feeling at the end of the book matches so well with the message of the story, I just still wish we had an ending. So, and I just talked about this book actually. Death on the Installment Plan by Celine, a book that is not for the faint of heart. It's the language, or the story is one of the most barbed and nightmarish ethereal voices that I can think of. This is the story of a very angry, pessimistic man living through horrors and telling his story. This is the sequel to Journey to the End of the Night, and I believe, I find this to be very comic. There's a handful of scenes in here which are dire, just these horrifying scenes that are intentionally comedic set pieces, and there's parts where I'll just howl through this book. And this is experimental as well. I don't know if it'll show. He uses those ellipses, and so it has that halting feel to it as you're reading it, as if someone is trying to tell you something and they can't even keep up with their own pace. They're so full of rage, it's exploding out of them, and it has that feel. And it's a style that marks Celine. It's his kind of trademark style, and you can see he kind of starts it. You can see it beginning in Journey to the End of the Night. This, I think, he does it to the best effect, and it runs through all of his later novels, which not that they're not worth reading, but that none of them are anywhere close to the energy that you'll find in this book. And then 10 books that I can, without too many qualifications, say are my favorites, some of my favorite books. We'll start with The Karamazov Brothers by Dostoyevsky, and this one in particular, this is the Ignat Avesy translation, which is still, I've read a few different translations. This is my preferred preferred rendering. And I think I made a couple videos talking about this. I just recently read it as well. Moby Dick by Herman Melville. It's actually a beautiful book. It has, let me see, it has illustrations by Rockwell Kent. But anyway, it's the story of a whale, and the language in the book is sonorous. It feels like rolling waves. It's oceanic in the way that the story is told. It is a strange book. It's almost half narrative, half essay. It's Ishmael getting on the boat with Ahab and chasing around the whale, and then just so much more than that. David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. And this is one of the very first books that my old friend Bob recommended to me when I said, what are the books I should read? What are the great books? And I remember it's David Copperfield, The Magic Mountain, and Middlemarch by George Eliot. And you can tell this is a kind of a well-worn book. I've read it a few times, and I still love it. It's Dickens can sometimes, Dickens very much writes these cartoonish characters, but just like it, in a different way from Dostoyevsky, who his characters are exaggerated to make a point. Dickens does that as well for different reasons, but it just, through a lot of his books, I think it works really well. Maybe it's overwritten, but he bites. Okay. And this is sort of the problem with trying to come up with a list like this. So I have Madame Bovary by Flaubert. This is the Lydia Davis translation. And if I had just a top 10 list, it very well could just be four or five out of the 10 would just be Flaubert novels. That's what happens with a favorite writer. This is again a fairly typical story. It's a story of domestic life. A woman who's unhappy in her marriage, is reading romances and not seeing that thrill of romance and love in her own marriage that she saw in the books. It's so much more than that, and it's perfect. It's every set piece, the way that the story is told, the perspective from which it is being told, the way that the chapters run. They don't just have episodes, and instead they kind of turn on other themes. I've read this a few times now as well, and it just gets better and better. I could just as easily be holding up Sentimental Education or Salambo. I don't know if, well, anyway. A lot of these are French, by the way. Toilers of the Sea by Victor Hugo. I just think this is enthralling. I have a soft spot for nautical, maritime stories. That's why one of the reasons, Moby Dick and this. And I just recently reread this as well. It has the inkwash illustrations, the inkwash paintings from Victor Hugo. So that's a Victor Hugo painting. And I think this is his best novel. It's my absolute favorite. Hunchback maybe technically is a more well-constructed story, but this is my favorite. And it's a what is his name again? Well, anyway, the main character, can't remember his name, but he goes off on this fatal adventure, this sea adventure. He has to go capture this ship engine that's locked up between these two rocks, and we just get to have just similar to Herman Melville, where it's a mix between narrative and explanation. So we have this adventure story, and then all of those really well-known digressions or asides that Hugo is known for. You see it in Hunchback and Les Miserables and The Man Who Laughs. So when I think of like what a favorite novel means, a very large consideration is how often do I either go back and enjoy the book, or how often do I like think about the book. And so this is an imperfect novel. It's Dead Souls by Gogol. This is my preferred translation. Donald Rayfeld. I've read maybe 2 other translations of this. I don't know why this is my favorite. And it's a mysterious man in Russia during the time of serfdom, and he's visiting different landowners, and so we get these set pieces where it's another sort of microcosm book. Each landowner gives you an idea of a whole walk of life in Russia, and he wants to buy the dead serfs. So these landowners have to pay taxes on the serfs that they have, and it had been a very long time since the last census, and so the landowners are paying taxes on serfs that have died, and now there's a man there asking to buy those dead serfs. And you get lots of reactions from the landowners. Why exactly would this person want to do that? And it's just great. This was the funniest translation. I think that's why I liked it so much. I said it's an imperfect novel because part 1, it's a 2-part novel. Part 1 is magnificent. It's everything that I ever think about or talk about when I talk about Dead Souls. Part 2 is not very good at all. Cancer Ward by Solzhenitsyn. I said that I just reread The Magic Mountain, and I had that in the almost favorites, and it could be that since I just read The Magic Mountain, and I thought, I think I found more reading enjoyment out of Cancer Ward. They're very similar novels. That microcosm novel, instead of a sanitarium, we're in a hospital ward, and I just thought this was incredible. We're sort of just shuffling around halls, having conversations and meeting people, but it's one of those like books of ideas. So you get all of this commentary on what was going on in the world. So Cancer Ward. In some ways, I'd like to hold up just remembrance of things past and say this is one of my favorite books. I know it. I'm not sure if it's considered one novel or a bunch of novels. I'm not sure how much I believe Proust had this whole thing. It's also an incomplete novel. It was never finished. But I'll just hold up the last. This is Finding Time Again. This is the UK paperback. That cover. We have Proust on the back. And the last volume is probably my favorite. Um, just the books, whatever it is, 2,000, 3,000 pages, whatever. And I feel like it comes to a satisfying conclusion. It ends really well. And I've always gotten the feeling that the ending justifies the length of the book. Uh, we look back, um, and it's a story that progresses. We have our narrator, um, very early 20th century, talking about his domestic life and what's going on with his family and his love life, and it's often self-centered and perverse, but also beautiful and generous and um, uh, perceptive. It's an incredibly perceptive novel, um, but it progresses. So by the end of the book, we start with horses and carriages and those gaslight lamps to telephones and cars, the war, the Great War is going on in Paris, and we just have a narrator at the end of the book looking back on his life. It's beautiful. Um, Jacques the Fatalist by Denis Diderot. It's a now I guess we would say it's an experimental. I guess when it was written, it was probably considered experimental novel. It's a philosophical novel and an experimental novel. Feels very modern. We have the narrator talking to and arguing with the reader. It's gosh, what are the two characters? It's Jacques the Fatalist, and I think it's just like the slave. It's written. Okay, yeah, it's the master and Jacques the Fatalist, and it's written in dialogue, and it's bursting with philosophical ideas, theories, and views on life, and also um, constantly commenting on the act of reading and how stories work, from hearing someone tell you a story to listening to a story to reading a story, um, and it's not a novel in any conventional sense. I just love it, and I like to go back and just read passages. I want to read. I'd like to read this again. It's been a little bit. And this is the last book that I'll show. None of these are in a particular order, so I'm not saying this is the number one book, but it's absolutely one of my favorites, and it's Don Quixote by Cervantes, the Man of La Mancha. And it's amazing. I love just the premise. Begins with this old man that goes mad from reading all of these books of chivalry, and he goes off on adventures with his sidekick. Uh, it's amazingly well told and um, unconventional, and takes chances, and we'll have a whole novella just inserted into the book, and we'll have digressions and side adventures, um, and it's this whole it feels like you're walking through this huge landscape, um, just behind this crazy madcap guy. It's funny and tragic. I mean, it's funny and sad. I'm looking forward to reading this again. This is going to be my this book is going to be with me on my journey to Spain when that happens. Uh, And yeah, so Don Quixote by Cervantes, I think one of the best novels ever written. I'm sure there's omissions, huge blind spots that I um, should have included and forgot or whatever, but um, just some of my favorite novels. Let me know what you think of the books that I shared. If you have any thoughts on any of them, if you'd like to tell me what your favorite books are, 20 or 10 or 2 or 1, I'd love to hear about it. There's Andy. So thank you for watching. Leave a comment if you would like, and take care.